dirt road in a gooseneck, saddle up with me. Dry land in God's country, crops far as I can see. Headlights on both ends of my day. This country life is for me. Ride with us, HPJ. Ride with us, HPJ.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the second session of High Plains Journal's virtual Cotton U. My name is Jennifer Latsky, and I'm the Associate Editor for High Plains Journal, and I'll be your moderator for this second and final session of our Cotton U, featuring John Robinson, Professor and Extension Economist of the Department of Agricultural Economics, Texas A&M, who will provide us a cotton market update, and then we will have our ever-popular farmer panel, which will round out the day's sessions with insights from around the region. Now, if you missed this morning's first session, don't worry. It was recorded and will be posted at hpj.com/cottonu as soon as possible. This registered attendees will receive emails when the session videos are posted. Now, I'm sure many of you have had some experience with Zoom over the last 7 months or so, but for those of you who may still be unfamiliar with how this is all going to work, I'm going to share some notes. First, we've already muted your video and microphones, and we ask that you keep those muted so that everyone can focus on the presentations at hand. If you have any questions, and that's exactly what we want to hear, we ask that you click on the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom screen and type your questions in the pop-up box that will appear. We've built in plenty of time to ask your questions during the webinar because this day is all about you, the producer. Now, the schedule of sessions and speakers is posted at hpj.com/cottonu. And remember, if you miss a session live or you have to drop off for some reason, you can always catch up with those recordings later at your convenience. Now, before we get started with our first speaker, here's a word from our sponsors for today's event.
I think you have to consider the history of what the cotton industry was facing in the late 80s and 90s to understand what Bollgard really offered to the cotton industry.
Before we had the Bollgard, we had insects was a major problem. Matter of fact, they were so bad that we'd have to go out and check our fields at least twice a week. It took all of our time. It took all of our labor. It took almost all of our money just to have the crop protection applications that we were making.
When we started planting Bollgard in 1996, we didn't realize, of course, the benefit until the harvest of that season. And then when we saw the harvest, our yields went up, I'm gonna say 150 pounds, just like that.
It changed our operation tremendously, not only in labor, it changed us on economics because we weren't spraying every 3 or 4 days.
What it means today for us gives us time to do other stuff. What comes to mind is watching my kids grow up, going on vacation with family.
When we think about the evolution and combination, what Bollgard has done, it really has changed the entire market for cotton. As we think about that being paired with other traits and technologies like Roundup Ready, then Roundup Ready Flex, Bollgard 2 and Bollgard 3, and other weed control options, it's been extremely exciting.
In the last 25 years or so, post-biotech cotton, Bollgard cotton introduction, we have developed varieties that offer growers insect management tools in the latest genetics with the ability to grow fiber of a quality that the world market demands. We continue to add upon that legacy but with other products, things like Bollgard 2, Bollgard 3, and now we've got a newer generation of these products coming along.
Thrive-On technology is a trait that we have in cotton. It's a biotech trait. First, to be able to help protect against thrips and plant bugs.
For a grower, it's more than just that highest yield. Obviously, that's extremely important, but it's also the agronomics, the fiber quality, the seed vigor. Everything adds up to make a variety experience for a grower.
When I think of strong cotton, I think of DeltaPine cotton, just because I have the faith that the breeders there and the people that work there have the farmer's best interest in everything that they do.
DeltaPine listens, and to me, that's the simplest way you can put it. We spend a lot of time talking about germplasm, but we spend a lot of time just talking about what do you need to stay profitable or to be more profitable 5 years from now.
I think it's a great history, it's a great example of science, and it's a great victory for all of science that we can do this and continue to do it as DeltaPine.
Good cotton will make your land payments, but you have to get a good stand to get the yield and quality you want. Cotton struggles to emerge, especially when it isn't planted well. That's why dusting it in, replanting, and watering it up are common. But the real issue with cotton emergence isn't the seed, it's the planting equipment that's out there today. That's right, the stock factory planter you are used to hasn't allowed you to maximize your stand. The planter you have struggles to plant the seed population you want, at the exact depth you want, and leave the seeds in a mellow environment that leads to easy emergence. You want to get a perfect stand with each seed you plant, though it's a struggle. But there is a better way. The cotton planting system from Precision Planting fixes the issues caused by planters. First, you save money on seed because it will plant the exact population that you are targeting. Second, the cotton planting system lets you adjust depth right from the cab, making sure you are putting seeds right where you want them. Last, the environment around your seeds will be mellow, letting your young cotton seedlings emerge with ease. You no longer have to settle for less than desirable cotton stands. Planting equipment plays a large role in getting a good stand, so don't let your cotton planter hold you back. You can choose to build the Precision Planting cotton system over a few years or add it all right now. A Precision Planting dealer is the expert to help you build the planter that will lead to success on your cotton acres. Ask about the cotton planting system at a Precision Planting dealer today.
Well, we want to thank all of our great sponsors like DeltaPine and Precision Planting, as well as the Texas NRCS, NexGen Americot, Western Equipment, and Ward Labs for helping us put on our virtual Cotton U. You'll be able to find more information about our sponsors and the services and products that they have to offer in your registration packet and materials that were also emailed to you this week. You can find more information online at hpj.com/cottonu. And now it is time to get started with our first speaker, John Robinson. John is no stranger to cotton growers here in the Panhandle. As an extension economist focusing on cotton marketing and risk management, he has worked statewide in Texas and Mississippi. John joins us to bring us a cotton market outlook and risk management considerations. John, the screen is all yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Let me see if I can share here. Very good. Sorry about that. This is why space shuttles blow up from time to time. It's technology. But so in the world, we got to account for all the other major players because that's where a lot of the influences on our market are now coming from. In terms of production, the U.S., of course, is the #1 exporter, but we're the 3rd largest producer behind China India, and you can see Brazil and Pakistan are on that list. And since I like maps, it's just kind of how that's distributed with those countries that I mentioned in the dark green. So in the world of textile milling and demand for cotton, we have the same top two: China, India, Pakistan's in there. Us and Brazil are listed in there. And the one thing I want to note, and I'll get around to talking about China a little bit more, is that not only are they the #1 consumer of cotton fiber in the world in terms of milling into thread, they're also the #1 exporter of apparel, although that share has been dropping just in 2020 for various reasons that I'll talk about, and may drop more. So keep that in mind. And you can again see the top players in the world of cotton consumption. So why did I start off with those slides? It's because, in the old days, we really needed only to worry so much about what was planted in the United States and what the weather was like in Texas, and you could get a pretty good feel for what ending stocks would be and what the market should be trading. But that's no longer, because now we have to worry about what's going on the other side of the world, how much is planted, what the weather is like, what the harvest conditions are, how Pakistan is doing. They're doing badly. I'll say that in passing. Things of that nature. It's a global market. We've got to worry about global supply and demand. And then we have to worry about things that really don't have anything to do with cotton or agriculture at all, like exchange rates in currency markets that affect the competitive position of cotton exporters. And we've got to worry about other things like trade relations and foreign relations, and how the Trump administration is getting along with China and how that might change in the next administration. None of which, again, has anything to do with agriculture or cotton, but it does influence our markets. So just things to keep in mind. And when it comes to the issue of the art and science of predicting prices, which is, I think, why I'm talking today, this really isn't rocket science. The fundamentals aspect of it is pretty straightforward. Basically, when we're thinking about how to predict prices, we're basically asking a question: what's happening to the leftovers? What happening? Remember's estimate of world ending stocks, you can see there USDA projected a little over 100 million, 101 something million. And we can compare that to the previous month. I've got them circled there. And the comparison is that there wasn't that much of a change. So as there's little change from month to month, that's kind of a neutral price expectation. When we have big changes from month to month, when ending stocks are projected to be higher now than they were the previous month, that's a bearish thing. As ending stocks go up, prices tend to weaken, and vice versa. The same is true in the United States. We had a neutral WASDE report in November. They didn't change much, to everybody's surprise. They didn't change either production or their guesstimate of ending stocks. So that's what I look at. That's what merchant analysts look at. That's what speculators in New York look at. We're all looking at the picture of the leftovers and how that picture is being adjusted from month to month, or even from year to year. If you look at beginning stocks, that's last year's ending stocks. And so we make year over year comparisons too. Again, simply asking the same question: are the leftovers getting bigger? That's bearish. Or are the leftovers shrinking? That would be a bullish sort of situation. And so that's what we look at. Of course, to judge whether ending stocks are getting bigger or not, there are a lot of moving parts. So here's that same balance sheet in the right-hand column for the U.S. cotton picture. This up here is how much we planted, over 12 million, and we're projected to harvest 9 million of that. And the average yield for the time being, until they adjust it, is 911 pounds per acre. And that leaves us with a 17 million bale crop. Now that's down from 18 million, or what USDA forecasted earlier in the year. But there has been a lot of questions. USDA has left this 17 million guesstimate for about the last 2 previous months, and they didn't change it in November hardly at all. And that's left everybody wondering, because if we think back to what kind of a year it's been, West Texas started off really dry. We've had more tropical storms slamming into the Gulf Coast than I can keep track of. It's been raining from Louisiana, from the Texas coast to Georgia. Then we've had early freezes and ice storms. And you heard Seth talking about low turnouts. There's just lots of expectation that this 17 million bales of production is too high. And frankly, everybody thought they were going to adjust it in October, and they didn't. And then we thought they'd adjust it in November, and they didn't. So that leaves me wondering, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that there's going to be a big adjustment coming in the December report or the January report? Well, maybe. Or does it mean that, well, we have more bales than people imagine, they just might be lower grade? You know, we might have an oversupply of low grade cotton. It frankly just has left me wondering, and we'll see what happens. Every merchant I talk to who crunches numbers has told me that they're really expecting a crop around 16.2, 16.3 million, something like that, maybe 16.0. 16.3 was what I told the reporters back in November. I thought the number would be. You know, they may end up cutting 700,000 bales off of this number, or 1 million bales off of it. If they do that, then this number will go down too. This is the exports. If we have less to export, they'll probably, if they cut production 1 million, they'll probably cut exports at least 500,000. And that would adjust the bottom line down here, which is the number that we're really focusing on. You know, cut production 1 million, cut exports 500,000. That number right there could drop from 7.2 to 16.7, 16.8, something like that, which is better than 7.2. And you can see year over year, it's somewhat of a lower number, but it's 16 or 6.5, 6.6, 6.7 is still a high number, historically speaking. So it's not really that bullish. It's moving in the right direction, but even cutting 1 million bales off of production wouldn't result, I don't think, in a very bullish situation. And I'll say one more thing, not to sound like a Debbie Downer just right out of the chute, but I think a cut right here and a cut to ending stocks is already priced into the futures market that we see. I think, like I say, the merchants have been expecting it, so their commercial positions are probably already taking account of a likely cut. I think the speculators, who I'll talk about more in a minute, are already anticipating a cut to production. And so I think that's already baked into everybody's futures market positioning. So I don't really see an opportunity for an adjustment here followed by a huge vindication rally. I just don't see that. Anything can happen, but that's kind of where I am on the old crop outlook. Now, again, there's a lot of moving parts to that, so we'll see how it plays out. Let me focus on some demand influences that are influencing the current situation, and I think are going to continue to be influential when we talk about the new crop outlook. So those would include how the general economy is doing, how cotton exports are doing, and how other outside influences are affecting the market. So let's just take a look at that. This is a picture of economic growth. It's GDP, global GDP. The blue one is for the world, and the red one would be Europe and the United States, and the green line would be emerging economies. You can see what happens during boom times like what we had back in the 2000s. GDP goes up, and I'll tell you, cotton consumption goes up with it. This is the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. And this is the pandemic recession that happened in the first and second quarter of this year. You can see this recession is worse than that one, but it's shorter lived. It goes deeper and then it comes back out, and it's projected to kind of continue kind of back where we were. That's important because in general, cotton consumption and cotton prices, the cotton market follows the influence of the regular economy, more so than other ag commodities, more so than grains, more so than corn particularly, more so than meats and livestock. Cotton, because it's made into discretionary consumer products, clothes and home furnishings, during tough economic times like this and this, people simply cut back and demand goes way down. Consumption goes way down. We've already seen that with apparel consumption, and we've seen it with cotton consumption around the world. Particularly here, this is not just a pandemic effect. This is an effect of mills closing because the workers, had COVID or whatever. This is an effect of consumers sheltering and malls and stores closing. That's kind of unprecedented. That on top of just the recessionary aspect of it, it makes this kind of unique. USDA is projecting, though, that we'll come out of it and that consumption is going to be restored to stronger levels in next year. So again, we'll have to see how it plays out. We do have vaccines being talked about, and the distribution of it may start soon. And it's my hope that vaccines get distributed, the health problem begins to subside, and the economy begins to recover. But all of that, to my thinking, has a lag to it, especially the vaccine medical part of it, and then the general return of consumer confidence. I think that's going to take a while, frankly. So I think these effects are going to be with us for a while. It's going to be affecting cotton consumption for at least a year or so until we can get back to something called normal. Anyway, this is the 30,000 foot view of cotton consumption. This is the close-in air to ground support view of cotton consumption. What I've got here is weekly exports. Those are those blue peaks and valleys. So for example, that right there is a little over 200,000 bales that were sold, booked for future delivery overseas. That's what that is. It fluctuates up and down. That's over 350,000. This is a big dip down. That's a negative number, but here's a dip down to almost zero. So it fluctuates a lot. It fluctuates with price movements. The red line is price movements. So you can see just right here recently, we had an uptick in prices, and week over week, we had a decline in net export sales. That's just economics at work. When things are more expensive, the mills buy less. When prices take a dip, we have an uptick in our weekly export sales. That's just following economics. Now you can see a number of things on this slide I want to point out. First, here's the decline in prices because of the pandemic recession. Okay, so it dropped from 70 cents plus down to below 50, and then it began to recover during the spring. And you can see there were some huge, really big slugs of purchases of U.S. cotton. What that is purchases mostly by the Chinese government. It's not Chinese mills, it's not commercial demand, but it's the government stepping in and buying new bales to rotate the bales that are in their strategic reserve. They have a government strategic reserve, and they wanted to replenish it with newer inventory. And so they've been stepping in and buying 90,000 bales at a whack. And that's what some of these really big spikes are. They've been doing that all spring, and that's what gave the market a bit of a lift. What else has contributed to this lift in prices has been speculative buying, which I'll talk about in the next slide or two. But this is one thing that's been going on. It's been, again, this Chinese buying, and just keep in mind, it's Chinese government buying for their reserve. It's still going on, and merchants are scrambling, trying to find product to meet the orders for these big sales purchases that are happening by the Chinese government. Okay, here's the other influence that I was going to talk about. This is a picture of speculative buying in the cotton futures market. Again, here's the same period of time, the major price decline, and then the rally. There's two types of speculators shown on here, and this is the number of cotton futures contracts that they're holding. These guys in blue are the buy and hold index funds. They tend to be kind of passive. They're buy only. But you can see when the pandemic started, these guys were holding 8 million bales worth of futures contracts. Well, they liquidated some of that as there was the pandemic recession was kicking in. They were having to kind of cut back in general. So they liquidated a lot of their positions. So there's some selling right there that contributed to this downtrend. Then there's these guys in green that are trend followers. Sometimes they're net long, sometimes they're net short, depending on which way they think the trend is. Well, they were a little bit net long when the pandemic started, and then they went short. They were actually short the market. They were betting that the market was going to go down, and they contributed to the downshift of that 20-cent decline. Okay, so that was in the springtime, and then we get into early summer. We get into June and July. These guys bought back their positions. These guys restored their position. So there was a lot of buying going on right in here and right in here. And that, besides the Chinese purchases, it's this speculative buying that lifted the market up, lifted it back up to the 70s, where it's been kind of bouncing around in the upper 60s, low 70s period. I kind of expect these guys in blue they're pretty stable. I expect them to maintain that level of buying. They'll just rotate. You know, they were just recently selling their Decembers and buying Marches, and they'll continue to do that probably. These guys in green, for them that have been going long betting that probably they were betting that the futures market was going to go up because of cuts to U.S. production. At some point, I think these guys are going to probably take their profits and get out of those bets, because the period of time for betting on the size of the U.S. crop is really coming to a close. We'll have a few more WASDE reports and they'll adjust the number, but I think that influence by these guys is probably coming to an end. And so they'll probably take their profits and then they'll either have to find something else to be bullish about, or they may shrink down to a lower position. And if that happens, then that bullish influence, that upward pull on this market might fade a little bit. And I'll say something else. If USDA comes along next month or this month in the December report and doesn't cut US production, and if they don't cut it, you know, if we still have 16.75 or 16.8 million bales of production and ending stocks are still around 7 million bales, that would be, if these guys are expecting the cut and they don't get it, they're not going to like that. They're going to sell off, basically. I could see them getting out, bailing out. I could see that dropping 2 or 3 or 4 cents if there's a disappointment. So again, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll have to see, but depending on what USDA serves up in terms of a production forecast, if there's not a big cut in our future, these guys are going to reset down, I think, and the market prices will too. Other issues, you know, Seth was talking about quality and turnout and lower yields potentially. And again, that's what everybody's expecting. So we'll have to see how it plays out. It's certainly been a tough year. We don't really know when the pandemic recovery to the economy, how long that's going to be. We're expecting it to come. We expect vaccines to be helpful, but we don't know how long it's going to take for consumers to get their confidence back. So again, we'll have to see. The Chinese purchases by the state, by the reserve purchases have been going on for a while, and they're still going on. We're waiting to see future purchases, a return to mills, commercial buying by China. We've had some of that, but we kind of expect if the economy recovers that we'd see more of that. And then there's one more aspect to the hope for increased commercial buying from China, and that's an issue regarding how we're treating cotton that comes from a certain region of China. The major cotton producing region of China is out in the northwest. It's called Xinjiang. And here recently, there has been some international sanctions that our government has been imposing upon Chinese cotton, textiles, and thread and cloth that's based on Xinjiang cotton. Let me turn to one of those. This is an article from September. This is when the U.S. Treasury Department issued an announcement about we're banning cotton from Xinjiang because of human rights, because the Chinese are incarcerating a lot of ethnic Uyghur people, the Muslim people that live out there. And so that's when the talk of sanctions first came. Yesterday, there was another discussion, another announcement of sanctions, and this time it's coming from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security by way of U.S. Customs. They're taking the same position that they're going to ban imports of cotton products that are from Xinjiang. Okay, so that's all of this happening is kind of building to a theory of, well, that might force the Chinese to take the cotton and the cotton products that come from this region and use them domestically if they can't export them. That assumes that that the U.S. ban is enforceable and effective. If it is, then China's going to have to find something to do with all this cotton product. Right now, they sell that product all over the world. They sell the cloth, they sell the thread to other countries who make it into clothes. Assuming we could identify that and sanction all that, the Chinese probably would shift, use all this cotton product themselves. And then what would all the commercial cotton exporting, apparel exporting businesses in China do? They would have to source their cotton from someplace else. And so the thought, it's a theory at this point, is that they would have to buy more, and that we would have more exports. More imports of cotton by China and increase the demand for U.S. exports. There's a lot of ifs to that theory, so we'll just have to see how it plays out. It would probably be a longer term deal. It has the potential to be a major deal that would, again, lead them to buying more of our exports. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. All right, so let me shift gears now and talk explicitly about the 21 crop outlook. When it comes to planting, if you take a simple approach and look at the ratio of corn futures to cotton futures, it kind of suggests that we might be planting around 13 million acres. This is what I base that on. This is millions of acres of cotton planted in various years. You can see it forms a nice scatter plot that's in a nice relationship with this ratio down here. What that is the ratio of December corn futures to December cotton futures. So just to make the math easy, if corn futures were $7 a bushel, which they're not, but if they were $7 a bushel and cotton futures were 70 cents a pound, you'd have $7 over 70 cents. You'd have a 10. The ratio would be way out here somewhere. We'd plant a lot of corn. We wouldn't plant much cotton if that was the case. But the ratio is not 10. The ratio is about 5.8 with new crop. That's DEES 21 corn divided by DEES 21 cotton price. It's about 5.8, which would historically put us right in here, maybe 12 and 3/4 million, maybe 13 million planted. So I'm just taking 13 as a number. The other big influence on next year's plantings will be the forecast of La Nina conditions. We're in a La Nina situation right now, which tends to make it drier and warmer than normal, particularly in the Southwest. And it's not just drier than normal because of the current La Nina, it's dryness upon dryness, because that's where we are right now. You know, this is December, and we look like that. So the soil moisture is extraordinarily dry, and we have a La Nina forecast from now until May. So dryness upon dryness, it could be pretty bad. So if I take 13 million planted, I'm going to assume above average abandonment. I'm assuming almost 30% abandonment nationwide. That's probably 50% abandonment in Texas. I'm assuming lower yields. That may not look like a lower yield to you, but that's what's left when all the dryland fails. You'll get an average yield nationally of 850 pounds. That's of course average again all the cotton yields to the east of us. You'll get less production probably and stronger prices, assuming that demand is kind of stable year over year. I'm expecting somewhat less production. I'm expecting stronger prices as a result of it. So here's just banging out some quick math. Let's say we wind up with a 16 million bale crop, assuming all that stuff, which we could have carry in from this year of 6.8 million, that 16 million of production, 6.8 million of carry in gives us 18 million of use, or that gives us a total less 18 million of use. We could wind up with the leftovers, what's important, the ending stocks of being around 5 million, okay? Around 5 million. So that's lower year over year. We're going from 7 million to 5 million. And that's a decline in, if we do that in percent terms, that's a decline in stocks to use from about 42% to 29%. Statistically, that would suggest that we might have prices be certainly higher and about 7 or 8 cents higher historically, when you have a percent decline from 42 to 29, that'd be worth about 7 or 8 cents in the futures market. I base that on this statistical relationship here. So that being the case, I might expect prices to, if they've been ranging a lot between 65 and 75 cents, or really they've been ranging from about 62 to 72 cents, jack that whole range up 7 or 8 cents. I might expect prices to range from the upper 60s to the upper 70s. I expect December 21 futures probably to range that. Now I was kind of curious, wondering, well, what's the price pattern of December futures in these La Nina type of years where you have a dry winter and the following December contract? How does it trade? So I went and got these December contracts, which were all seasons following a dry La Nina winter. And I averaged them together, and here's the average price. But you can kind of see the pattern is what's important. You basically see an upward movement in prices across the spring going through the planting period, because there's a lot of extra uncertainty about what's being planted, but particularly what's going to emerge. And then when some of that uncertainty about at least what's emerged goes out of the market, you see a big downshift, and then sort of still some volatility around. Here's the August supply and demand report. Here's the September supply and demand report. There's always kind of uncertainty and surprises related to that, particularly in dry years. So you see a little bump up in prices there. That's kind of the pattern. So if I was to take this and superimpose it onto December 21, we could see prices going up from, they're trading around 70, 71. I could see them ranging up into the mid 70s. I could see December 71 going over 75 cents. When would that happen? Probably during this period of uncertainty in the springtime. And then I would see some weakness after that. So there's my alarm to tell me to wrap up. So anyway, I'm expecting somewhat higher prices. I'm expecting them to probably happen during the springtime. And so right now, here's a picture of a December put option. It's too expensive at 8 cents a pound, but I think prices are going to rise more. And so as prices go up from where they're trading now, December 21 from 71, if it rises up to 75 cents, this will probably drop down to 5 or 4 cents. It may become affordable. There may be some hedging opportunities and certainly some merchant pricing opportunities for expected production, which is hard to gauge when you're in a dry La Nina situation. But for people that have reliable production, I would be looking for the late spring I'll be looking across the whole spring for selling opportunities, particularly when the market rises up to a more meaningful level. There's my contact info, and with that, I'll be happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
All righty. Well, thanks, John. I always learn so much when you talk about cotton markets and economics and things. It's fascinating to me to see just how far American cotton goes around the world and how globally we are tied in. Isn't it that interesting? Well, folks, we're going to go to your questions, and remember, you can ask those by clicking on the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and typing those in the box that pops up. And while we wait for those to come in, John, you and I had a chance to talk a little bit before you came on, and one of the things that some people may ask is, if supply is supposed to be decreased after this next WASDE report, why isn't the prices higher? Why aren't we going to see higher cotton prices?
Yeah. My answer to that is that I think the people who put their money where their mouth is, that would be the commercial buyers and sellers, the merchants, and the speculative buyers. I think they've already, the ones I've talked to are already expecting, they think that the U.S. production is going to be 16.2 or 16.0 or maybe even less. So that's already built into the buying that they've done and the selling that they've done. So that's why I think it's already priced in. The expectation of lower production is already priced in. So I think the real concern is what if USDA doesn't really come in and cut that number in December? We're kind of running out of time for those kinds of adjustments. If there's a disappointment, if I put it that way, on the part of USDA, then I think the market is at risk of really, being set back, a sell-off. We might see it go down 2 or 3 or 4 cents rather than having this vindication rally. Finally, the stupid government is getting around to the right number and the market is giving us what we deserve. I think it may be the reverse. I think the market is already reflecting lower production. And if we don't get it, then we're in danger of weakness from here.
Okay. So you and I spoke in, I believe it was probably March or April, right at the top of the pandemic coming down on some cotton trends. And one of the things that struck me was because everybody was sheltering at home, nobody was buying Easter dresses. And so that was just one of those things that just came up in our cotton demand and such. You spoke a little bit about COVID and its effect on our markets and our economy and everything. Is there anything that you can see as we come out? We've got the announcements of some vaccines. People are starting to, we're hoping that by this time next spring, everything should be okay again. Is there something else that we've learned from inside the pandemic that's possibly good news for cotton growers?
Well, the way it's worked out is that the brick and mortar, the clothing stores at the mall have taken the big hit, but the Amazon.com model of buying clothes has really been a lot higher. So I guess the question is, will people continue to buy clothes, through Amazon? Will that be the way of the future? Another way to ask the question is, when will consumers feel confident enough to go to the store, go to the mall, go back and spend money? When will their financial situation, a lot of people are unemployed, a lot of people are waiting on stimulus from the government to be able to, pay their rent and stuff like that. Well, I think a lot of things they're going to take care of a lot of things first before they go back and buy new wardrobes. So even though vaccines are on the horizon, and recovery may be something we can envision, the recovery of discretionary purchases like clothing, to me, that's probably still a year off. I would think maybe more. So it's just, there's going to be a lag there that's, I think, going to affect our market.
Well, and I imagine that when they do go back to buying, they may not be going for collared shirts. They may be looking for more things like yoga pants or other athleisure type clothes. Don't you imagine?
Well, I'll just speak for myself. I put on a clean shirt for today, but I've been working at home more days than I've been going to the office. Well, I'm dressing pretty comfortably working at home. Both my children are schooling at home. So we're just, that has definitely affected our consumption of clothing and a number of other products too.
So remember, everybody, you can get those questions to us. Just click on the chat box and type those away, and we'll ask them here. One of the things that we talked about at last year's Cotton U event in person there in Amarillo was the new sustainability initiative rolled out by the cotton folks. Do we see that consumers, while they may have had more of a closer relationship with their purchases? We saw a lot of folks that were trying to buy more local, or they're home more and they're thinking about their purchase decisions a little bit more. Do we see sustainability as still a consumer-driven demand? I mean, is there still consumers that want sustainable cotton, and however that shapes out?
Jennifer, to answer your question would probably require, some consumer survey work that's probably been done, and it's not on the tip of my tongue or in my memory. So I'll just speak for, my wife is probably the target shopper of cotton apparel. And I think my wife mostly is making her decisions based on comfort, price, and style. If you surveyed her and said, do you care about microfibers of plastic in the ocean or other problems with man-made fibers and things of that nature, she'd say sure. But when it comes to her buying decisions, I think they're kind of the traditional ones.
Okay. So let's go back to the Xinjiang province and in China and the news that we saw last night. And you touched on it a little bit there. We're no longer going to be accepting cotton goods that were produced by Chinese cotton that was grown there. You and I were talking. It's a little bit difficult to trace back where that cotton was grown in China, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're growing cotton, they're spinning some of it, they're manufacturing some of that cotton into apparel in Xinjiang and then selling it. Or they're exporting the yarn, exporting the cloth, and it's going to other countries and they're manufacturing apparel out of that. I assume there's labels, systems, and whatnot. I don't know how reliable, or, I don't know if people can cheat. I have no idea. If it's enforceable, if you can trace cotton apparel in Bangladesh back to Xinjiang and ban it, and for any other country, if you can ultimately ban Xinjiang cotton from entering the world market, well, then that would seemingly force China into using that cotton domestically and having to import more cotton to do their normal export business. But that's a big if, and we just have to wait and see. And we would see it coming in terms of larger new purchases by cotton mills in China, commercial mills. When they start buying more and more and more imports, then we'll know that this is real.
So finally, one more thought that I had along those lines. How are we doing as far as our competition on the world stage, competing fiber from Australia, India, Brazil? How are American farmers shaping up?
There's sort of two groups that you need to compare to. So the Brazilians and the Australians, and I guess what little is grown in the European Union, represent quality cotton that's machine picked, and it's reliable quality. And so we compete with those competitors. We have reliable quality cotton that is the quality that we say it is. We're competing on price with them. Okay. When it comes to us competing with India and West Africa and other hand-picked cottons, they have a lot of contamination in them. And so we're competing really with reputation of quality and with information services. We may be higher priced than them, but people are still going to buy U.S. cotton because of the reputation for quality, which hopefully will maintain. Hopefully the issue of plastic and cotton doesn't, erode our reputation in that regard. So it's sort of how we're competing well. We always have. We just have to maintain. We have to maintain that reputation of quality, particularly when we're talking about competing with lower cost countries like India.
Okay. So we have a question that came in a little bit on the privately to me from an anonymous one. We heard from the USDA economic research folks yesterday on farm income, and we saw that for another year, government payments made up over more than 40% of farm income, and that's really a lot of everybody's balance sheet. You and economists like yourself, what's the word that you're hearing as far as is that something that is sustainable, or what does that bode for cotton farmers?
Well, I was on a conference yesterday, and I heard our policy people basically confirm that same situation, that were it not for some of those payments, that cotton farms financially be a whole lot more stressed than they are. Is it sustainable? Is it politically sustainable? Let's answer that question. As long as we can maintain our safety net, then we have that support. I don't know what else to say.
Okay. Well, any final thoughts for the audience?
Well, from a marketing standpoint, I would just say opportunities happen. They tend to come pre-harvest many times. The higher prices that we see, like in the outlook I gave, the higher prices of the year might be, in March, April, May. And so people need to, I think, take that into account in their planning, in their hedging, in their sales plan, to try to grab some of those opportunities when they happen. Even though it's a drought year, we still have seasonal price weakness later in the fall, only because the uncertainty goes out of the picture. So plan for that.
Okay. Well, John, again, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so very much for joining us at Cotton U, and I look forward to seeing you in person on the trail someday.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very much of that, and thank you for having me.
Well, now while we get our farmers lined up for the farmer panel, we want to take a brief moment to recognize some of our sponsors for today's session. We want to thank DeltaPine, Precision Planting, Texas NRCS, NexGen Americot, Western Equipment, and Ward Labs. We really appreciate these sponsors, and we want to draw your attention to the digital program that will be emailed to all registrants with information about our sponsors. Well, now it's time for the hallmark of all High Plains Journal U events, the Farmer Panel. So joining us today are Jeremy Brown and Stacey Smith. Jeremy farms 4,000 and a little bit over 4,000 acres of cotton, organic cotton, wheat, and other varieties of grains in Dawson County. As a fourth-generation farmer, he is passionate about soil health, stewarding the land and its resources, and he implements regenerative practices. Stacey Smith farms near New Home, Texas, about 10 miles south of Lubbock. His wife, Amy, teaches and helps with the operation of the farm. Their daughter, Taylor, is a freshman at Texas Tech as a plant and soil science major, and their son, Connor, is a freshman at New Home High School. Stacey is the board chairman of New Home Co-op Gin, the current board chairman of Plains Cotton Growers, and he's also involved with the National Cotton Council and a director with Cotton Incorporated. Gentlemen, welcome. It's wonderful to see you on the screen. I believe we've got Jeremy. There you are, Jeremy and Stacey. Welcome, gentlemen. See if we can, and we'll have you. And there you go.
Thank you. Good to be here.
First, I'm going to let each of you again give us a little bit of a snapshot of what your farm operation looks like, so we can get an idea of your rotations, your production methods, for those of us that can join. Or, sorry, for those of us that are not familiar. Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I was hoping you start with Stacey, because Stacey's he's my senior friend. I live just a mile from Stacey's gin, and have a lot of respect for Stacey and what he does for cotton. As you said, I farm in Dawson County, where 60% of the acres that I farm is dry land, so it's rain fed only. So the last 2 years have been really rough. We've had hardly any really significant rainfall to help us, and then the 40% of the land that I farm is irrigated, and we kind of consider that semi-irrigated. But it's been tough the last 2 years just because of lack of rain and higher than normal temperatures. But the crop that I mainly grow is cotton. We do rotate a lot with wheat. So most of my center pivot irrigation systems have wheat on one side that we harvest, and then the other side is cotton, and we flip those. And then when we're not growing a crop to harvest, we're growing cover crops to benefit the soil, to feed the soil microbes. We even do that on our dry land when the rain allows us to do it. But yeah, and like I said, out of those total acres, about about 40% of that is organic. And we got into organics just because of market opportunities, and it really fit my production practices that we do here. And so, I love growing cotton. It's what I'm passionate about doing. I just would really like these weather patterns to change. I wasn't too excited to hear Dr. Robinson say this La Nina is going to last till May. That's not very comforting, but that's what we do as farmers. We work with what we get.
There you go. Well, and Stacey, tell us a little bit about your farm and what makes your farm so special.
Well, farming's always been special to me. I was born on the farm that I still live on. It's a family farm. My grandfather owned it, farmed it, skipped a generation. My dad didn't farm, and I came back to it after getting a degree in marketing from Texas Tech. It's good to see Jeremy, by the way. We're basically neighbors. I saw Jeremy on the email list. I didn't know it was that Jeremy. So the only thing I'll follow up with him on is how much of his senior he considers me. I'm not sure about the age difference there, but no, we grow cotton, corn, grain, sorghum, and wheat. If you would ask me this question 15 years ago, I would have said we grow strictly cotton. The only time we plant anything else is if we get hailed out. That's changed. That's changed because of economics. It's changed because of soil pests. And it's changed because of the need to build up the organic matter in our soil so that we can produce better cotton. And that's changed pretty much everything we do and the way we look at it. And in our operation, we're still in the process of making that change all the way across the board. But it's good to be here today, and I look forward to visiting.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we'll kick it right off with the agronomic basics, because that's always the one thing. As I tell people, these are just tailgate talks. So farmers talking to farmers. And everybody, if you've got questions while we're talking, please go ahead and add those to the chat box, and we'll ask them while we're having this conversation. So first off, Stacey, you mentioned that you started rotating out of cotton into other crops. When you started making those decisions, what were the top 3 things that you had to think of for your farm? What were your 3 goals as far as bringing in rotations of other crops?
That's kind of a double answered question. When I first started doing it, it was simply because we had encountered a pest called a reniform nematode, and we could not grow cotton back-to-back years. That problem has spread. It's spread across our area. It's spreading in other regions. It's not just localized to West Texas. And then as I got into that, I saw the benefits of what it could do to your cotton yields and to soil health that I've seen in the last 3 to 4 years. So it changed. At first, it was just, I felt pressured into it. Then as we went through that process, it became, or we could see the benefits that came out of that beyond just the suppression of that nematode.
Okay. And you mentioned that you use corn and wheat in your rotation?
We use grain sorghum, corn, and wheat. It started with grain sorghum. When corn prices went higher it was around 2013, we got into the corn situation because we tried it. We had never grown corn before. We typically don't have the water for it. You have to be very careful to manage your acres, match your acres to your gallons per minute per acre. Our favorite rotation probably is grain sorghum because it kind of has a double-edged sword. It's resistant to reniform and it's resistant to root knot. Corn is resistant to reniform, but it is not resistant to root knot. In fact, it is a pretty good host. So that can present you some problems following that with cotton the next year. Wheat has been a good rotation for us. From the water side of it, it's the best one because we're not trying to water 2 crops at the same time. When I have grain sorghum on half of a pivot and cotton on the other half, I'll tell myself at the beginning of the year, I'm always going to focus on cotton, but invariably I have to go water the grain sorghum a little bit, and it's never good when you don't get enough rainfall. So the wheat is a good water management tool, and it is good for both pests. But those are the 3 that we've used mostly. And mostly now we're back to more of a grain sorghum wheat simply because of our depleting water situation with irrigation.
Okay. Well, Jeremy, I think you and I first met at the 4R Awards in San Antonio, what feels like a century ago, before the pandemic. You have such a strong thoughts on working with making sure that you apply the right nutrient at the right time. Tell us a little bit about how that works in your operation and your regenerative soil thoughts and how you're trying to build back your soils.
Yeah, well, thank you. It does seem like a long time ago that we were in San Antonio. I mean, the world has drastically changed since then. You know, kind of like Stacey, I got on this journey where I farm. We're real sandy loam soils. And really it started mainly as I was just tired of seeing the sand blow, you know, erosion. And so we started, you know, doing cover crops and mainly just a wheat cover. And as I started down this journey, I started learning more about, you know, introducing legumes into the mix, cover crop mixes, increasing the mixes. And so we really just started trying to focus on how can I grow the best crop to benefit my soil and also benefit my falling cash crop. So like I said before, cotton's really the crop that makes us the most money. And I grow all these other things basically to benefit the soil to help grow a better cotton crop. And so as I started down that road of trying to increase our soil health and using like hairy vetch and, you know, sun hemp, other things different in our mixes, we started trying to decrease our synthetic inputs because I'm a business owner. And so if I can cut expenses, you know, we just heard John talk about the prices. And so the price that I'm selling my product for is really not changed a whole lot and forever. I mean, my granddad was selling cotton for the same price in the 70s and early 80s as I am today, but our inputs have just drastically increased. And so with that 4R program, you know, I really just started trying to figure out, okay, where do we need to apply fertilizer? Where do we not? I feel like a lot of times we were getting information that was from my fertilizer salesman and, hey, we're good buddies, but he's not having to pay these bills. And so, you know, just really trying to get as precise as we can. And I will say I'm not where I want to be. I'm still learning. We're trying to use these Haney tests. We're trying to use different things to look at the microbes, look at the cover crops, look at really from a, you know, what is our ROI? What is our return on our investment? And so, you know, if we don't need to apply that fertilizer and maybe not, it won't hurt our yield. And that's another thing, you know, I'm trying not to always just focus on yield. It's really dollars per acre, you know, what this land can do and what it can return to me. And make a profit. All that to say, when it doesn't rain and it's so hot, it doesn't really matter what we do, which gets a little frustrating at times as a farmer. But you know what, I'm just so passionate about trying to heal our land. I feel like we've degraded our soils so much, especially the more I learn about production practices and the things that we're using. And so just trying to be a better steward of that. Like I said before, I'm not where I want to be, but I feel like we're on a road that hopefully in the near future, we can be growing our own nitrogen. I mean, there's so much nitrogen in the atmosphere. If we can capture that with legumes and maybe decrease our synthetic use is really my goal. So hopefully that answered your question. I hope.
It does. Now, while I've still got you here, Jeremy, how do you give your cotton the best start at planting? You know, what works best for your field needs, for crop inputs, and like we heard from Stacey, you know, with the nematode problems, are there specific pests or weed pressures that you have to manage for before you even get cotton in the ground?
Yeah, so and it all varies by production practice. So, you know, what I do on my organic land is different than what I do on my non-organic land. What I do on my irrigated land is different than what I do on my non-irrigated land. But, you know, we're just trying to give it the best start that we possibly can. One of the things that we started doing a couple of years ago is we're crimping our covers and trying to, you know, basically with simple concept is create as much mulch, trash, whatever you want to call it, to help with weed suppression, with help with water infiltration, decrease evaporation. And so we started growing a lot of cereal rye at high rates. And what we do before planting is we roll it over. We crimp it, basically creating a mat on the soil. We can only do that where we have irrigation to help us with that process. But it's amazing to see how much moisture it retains in the soil if you're not having bare soil, losing that to these hot evaporating days. It helps with cooling the soils. Now that's something you have to kind of watch it with cotton planting is you got to make sure your soil temperature is good. And so that's one of the things that we've kind of had to learn and tweak. Yeah, so we just try to give the best opportunity for the cotton to start off as strong as possible. Like I said, it's just, and these last 2 years just hurt so bad because when we got to planting, especially in 2020, we were already so dry. And so we were starting in a deficit. And so it seemed like we just never could get that back to where we needed to, even where we had irrigation. It just could not keep up. Even with rolling the covers and doing all these different things, we've got to have the rainfall to help us where I farm. And so, yeah, we try. We do a lot of soil testing. We do variable rate fertilizer where it shows that soil test needs it. Some farms don't have such a variable, but some farms where we will do variable rate as in our pre-fertilizer to try to use the exact amount where we need it. But it's hard to say. I can't paint a broad brush because every farm's so different. I try to treat each farm unique and what it can do and what its potential is and what we've been doing over the years. Like I said, we just need it to rain, Jennifer. It just that's all I can think of right now. It just has not rained in so long that a lot of these things are just, we can't do until it rains. So,
prayer, I always pray for rain. I'm a farmer's daughter. I don't even care if we had a rain the day before. It's still in the prayer every single time.
Exactly. If you don't ever listen to a farmer that says he doesn't want to rain, because I'm like, come on, man.
He's not been farming long.
No.
Well, Stacey, how do you give your cotton the very best start at planting? You talked a little bit about reniform nematode, but are there other problems that you're looking for, or is there something that you do to the soil to make sure that you give that crop the very best start it can?
One of the things we try to do at the beginning is make sure we have some fertility there. As we go on, we try to be more efficient, more precise with fertilizers, not to over-fertilize. But when you look at larger size operations, like a lot of people have their family operations, but they've grown in acres just to be economically viable. And I made the mistake one year of just waiting to see what we had with our fertility. And you get caught in that cycle and you're so busy, you can't get it put out on every acre then once that acre needs it. And if you have a little bit of fertility there, just make sure it has a good start from that side of it. If you're doing this in cover, I agree with Jeremy, there's other things we can do to make our cover. It's one thing to have cover. It's another thing to optimize your cover, to give that crop the best protection that it could have. And those are the two things. There's so much viability when we start. We don't, once we plant a seed, we don't know what road we're going to go down. Is it going to be a successful crop? Is it going to be replanted? Is it going to go to another crop because of our weather environment? So we have to balance between getting a start that it needs, but let's not put all our eggs in one basket right out the gate. One thing I would like to comment on that Jeremy made a good point of on soil health. I want to go back to that for 1 second because we're kind of neighbors out here, and I know there's a lot of people listening to this from different regions. A lot of other areas across the Cotton Belt never ran into the soil health issue that we have because the rainfall allowed them to plant different crops. If corn was higher price, plant corn. If beans were a higher price, plant soybeans. And they've been in this rotation all through the years, whereas in West Texas, especially on dry land, cotton is our economic driver. And it's not because people just made that choice to plant cotton every year. That's what paid the bills. And it's still what pays the bills. And that's what's making it difficult on dryland acres to make some changes that may need to be made, but you just can't because of the economic aspect of it.
Yeah, it's always balancing what the land needs and what the people on the land need, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It always has been, and it's not changing.
Yep. Well, now, Stacey, through the growing season, what are you monitoring, and what sort of diagnostics are you using? And is there something new that you started using that you can't imagine life without? Whether that's technology or a tool or even varieties.
There are some varieties. There are some things on the horizon with technology coming to address some of the nematode situation. I look forward to the opportunities that can provide. That being said, when it comes to the genetics that are that are in cotton for nematodes, whether it's root knot, reniform, where we've had these reniform situations, these opportunities don't mean we can go from 2 bales to 4 bales. These opportunities mean we can stay in the cotton business. And that is what I think is an incredibly driving force. It's incredibly encouraging. There's also an economic threshold of what we can sustain with that benefit as well. I've used a little bit of the variable rate planting. I think that has benefits on some farms where you have a lot of different soil types, say within a circle. I would like to look more at variable rate fertility. We have not done a lot of that, actually none, quite frankly. I think that anything that we can do to show us where we need to spend our money and where we need to spend less money. Because as farmers out here on the job, we cannot change the prices of our commodities. Everyone listening knows that we need a price for our commodity, but that is not in our control. Where we're going to have more control is in what we spend. And even though I have spent what I think is the bottom dollar of what I can spend on a crop year, I need to find ways to spend less because that's the only thing I can control.
Every single economist that I have ever talked to in my 20 years of talking to folks at High Plains Journal, if you're the low cost producer, you'll be a producer to next year. That's what they always told me.
And that's getting really difficult to do.
It is. It certainly is. Well, Jeremy, as you're going through the growing season, same question. What are you monitoring? What sort of diagnostics are you using? What maybe is a tool that you're using that, boy, you just could not live without?
Well, I don't know if I have one that I could not live without. I mean, we're trying to monitor a lot of different things. So, we're using a thing called sap analysis especially on our higher input, what I call good land where we normally can make good yields on. So we're doing what we call sap analysis, and we do that pretty often where we send it to a lab where it gives you it's not a tissue sample. It really gives you a good sample, an idea of what that plant is showing at that time. And so, if sometimes we might have applied what we thought we needed to apply in a fertilizer, and we're showing some deficiencies, and so we might try to address those. But like Stacey said, it all comes down to economics, and sometimes maybe it's showing something or not, but I got to look at the economic side of that. We're also doing a lot of moisture probes, where we're on our irrigated land, monitoring that moisture. Now, what I like to do is just look at it, and it's one of the considerations I use in my decision making. I don't let it make my decisions. It might show that my profile's fine for the next 7 days. Well, it'll take that pivot 7 days to get around. So, we're still going to probably irrigate, but we're trying to do as much as we can. But like, Stacey brought up a great point. We've cut almost everything we can cut. I mean, trying to figure out how to be as, precise as we can and still make a decent yield. It seems like it's becoming harder and harder. So yeah, we're always monitoring, and I get hit up with a lot of new technology that are coming, but my question always goes back to what's the return on my investment? And as a farmer, we got to spend our money where we can spend it. And I love what Stacey just said. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. We got to control what we can control, and we can't control the weather, and we can't control the markets at times. And so, just trying to focus on what we can control, and it seems like it's an everyday challenge. But yeah, we're doing the best we can. I feel like it's just, you do what you can and hope for the best. But I'll go back to what John Robinson was talking about earlier. That I think this crop year is going to come in way less than what the USDA was saying, because man, it didn't matter what we controlled this year. It seems like yields are way off. So,
well, now, that question just went right out of my head. Heavens to Betsy, it'll come back. This happens. Folks, remember you can add your questions to the chat box and we'll ask them here. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about marketing and ginning. And Stacey, you've got interest in cotton gins nearby, and we've seen a lot of capacity growth in cotton gins in Kansas and Texas. What are some opportunities and challenges on the marketing side that you see today for cotton growers?
Well, in respect to the growth in cotton gins, I'm in an area where back when I was a kid or when my granddad farmed, there was a cotton gin every 10 miles. I mean, there was multiple cotton gins. And as far as the increase in gin capacity, different things like that, as gins are slowly going away, and that's unfortunate in many cases. You need to have the capacity in your gin to gin your customers' cotton in a timely manner. There's only so much you can do at some point, but nevertheless, as more bales come to your gin in your area, you need to be able to handle that. You need to be able to handle it well. Mm-hmm. From a quality aspect, the thing, in our area, so much of the quality of the crop is determined by weather. If we plant that cotton early and get it all the way through just like we want it, we can have some fantastic qualities now in West Texas cotton based on the varieties that we've had. We can compete with anyone in the world. If we have some situations like I had on my farm this year, and probably Jeremy too, where you replant, you plant late, you get an unheard of 37-degree morning in September, those things affect your quality, and much like the weather, which it's related to, it's out of your control. From the ginning aspect of quality, as we move forward, there's more round bale harvesting equipment. Gins need to be very aware of that. They need to handle that plastic properly, because we've all heard about it. When you look at the global environment, the merchants, the mills, they don't want plastic in their cotton. So from the local aspect, we need to keep plastic out of the field. There's two different types of plastic. I live in an area where there's a lot of urban expansion. There's trucks going down the road every day with building materials wrapped in plastic. That's not good. We have the job to clean that out at the farm. We have to make sure plastic stays out of what we take to the gin, and the gins have the responsibility of making sure cotton stays out, or plastic stays out of that cotton going forward. And I think that's the most that we can do right now to ensure the quality and the reputation of the cotton that we grow.
Okay. Now, we heard last year about the Trust Cotton Protocol. Did I get that right? Because I always get those words mixed up.
Cotton Trust Protocol.
I knew it. I knew I was going to get them mixed up. That's why I have Google. So we heard about the Cotton Trust Protocol. And that's it's supposed to help us expand markets for cotton. It's supposed to give that sense of trust and talk about the sustainability aspect of cotton. How does that, give me your thoughts on that and sustainability, and what does that mean for your farm, and what does that mean for the farmers in your area?
Well, for the farmers in our area, and any farmer anywhere, we want a market. We need a market for our product. And this is something that if it makes retailers, merchants, and the people that buy our cotton, mills, it's going down to that, if they need to feel good about the product they're getting, and we need to grow cotton. The farmers have done an excellent job. They ask farmers to improve things, but a lot of people that are not there every day don't know what the farmer already does. That's the American farmer. And these things are what we need to do. We need to be sustainable. Sustainable on my farm means that I preserve as much irrigation water as I can for the future while being economically viable. It means that my soil stays healthy. At the same time, I have to stay in business. And I do what I have to do that, as we discussed before. But when you talk about some sustainability measures that are better for our buyers, I would also like to see some of that benefit come home to the cotton producer himself. If we are doing more, if we are jumping through hoops, that we need to be rewarded for our efforts through this process. That's a personal belief I have. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone, but I would like to see that mesh as it goes up the chain with the sustainability movement.
Okay. I agree with you. It doesn't do anybody any good if farmers don't benefit at the very grassroots level, because they're the ones that have the largest skin in the game, it feels like. So they need to have some support there. Now, Jeremy, you've got organic cotton, and you found a market for that. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts going into that, and you know, why did you go into it, and what were the opportunities there, and maybe some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, you know, the organic is, I really enjoy that part of my business because it's a niche market. I have a closer relationship with the end buyers, the people that buy our cotton. We have a marketing co-op that sells our cotton, and I serve on that board. And so, and a lot of people don't realize that if you're going to buy U.S. grown organic cotton, most of it's going to come from here in the South Plains, West Texas region, because of our climate. Helps with a kill and freeze. We have low insect pressure. And so, it makes us unique. For my operation, being a predominantly dryland farmer, being an organic dryland farmer really works for me. Now, it doesn't work for everybody, but my weed pressure is limited. Weeds only grow when it rains. We're limited on our yields, but it's given me it's allowed me to diversify in my business. Like I said, it's not for everybody's operation, and I understand that, but I really like that part of my business because of the relationships that I've gotten to develop over the years. And plus, I will say that with all the new technologies that we have and all the new cotton varieties, the organic variety that I plant was a variety that we planted in the 90s, and it still holds just as up to the new stuff that we pay a lot of money for. I think I have a unique perspective because I grow both organic and non-organic. And sometimes I scratch my head wondering why I spend all this money in some of these technologies that we don't need, because my organic stuff is yielding the same yield. Now, yes, weed pressure is higher. I have to deal with weeds. Labor costs are a little higher. But, like I said, it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. But, I go back to what Stacey said, though. The biggest problem I have is on our buyers is they're going to need to pay a higher price for the things that they're wanting farmers to do. And that's whether it's an organic farmer or a U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, whatever that is. Seems like these retailers are using that as a tool to market their product, but they're not passing on that price increase to the farmer. We see it in our organic business. There's companies out there that I know what they're selling their product for, and when that comes down to the farmer, still not near what we need to stay in business and be sustainable. It's like I said, I'm glad I have that part of my business. Like I said, it's not for everybody, but it works well for me and where I farm.
Okay. Now we do have a question going back to the agronomics aspect from Shandley. Any experience with drilled milo for this year's grain and next year's cover? They're asking 40-inch milo just won't hold a farm too well. So I'll since I've got you, Jeremy, I'll have you start first, and then we'll ask Stacey.
Yeah, I do drill my milo on my irrigated land. I personally like the narrower row stuff on where I've got irrigation. I've actually played with all different row spacings on irrigation. On dryland, I don't grow much dryland milo. To me, I'd rather grow dryland wheat and then let that farm sit out for a year and then plant, as Seth talked about in his presentation, plant cotton into that dryland wheat stubble from the year previous. And so I do that where I can when the rains allow it to happen. So I can't really speak to the dry land, but on the irrigated, I really like, I have the last few years when I have grown milo, I don't grow a lot of it because of the pattern, the crop rotation that I'm in with wheat. And it kind of depends on the farm and the year. But when I do, a lot of times on the irrigated land, I do drill it solid. So.
Okay. Stacey, same question. Drilled milo for this year's grain and next year's cover?
One thing I have done, I typically, when I've planted milo, I've gotten back to a 40-inch just because of some water pressure or lack of. But I have drilled grain sorghum, and it depends on the configuration of your wheat drill. But on mine, for example, if you pull out or you cap the drill that would be right in your 40-inch cotton drill, and then you were left with a milo row about 8 inches on both sides of your 40-inch center, so to speak. And then you had 2 rows of milo where you normally would have one. Then the next year you plant your cotton in between those 2 rows of milo, which would be your normal 40-inch center for cotton. It's worked really well. You have double the protection you do when you just go on a 40-inch center with your grain sorghum. The only thing you have to consider is your weed pressures. Do you normally plow your grain sorghum? When you get into this, you don't have that option. If you get into any kind of weed pressure, you're strictly tied to the chemical game. You want to make sure that your grain sorghum is out far enough to not give you cotton harvesting in our area issues that next year with your row units, because those crown roots can be there. Might need to move them to the side with some tillage possibly later. I don't know if you're talking about no-till. If that's the case, just make sure they're spaced far enough away from where you're going to plant your cotton the next year. It does increase your cover. It does work. If you're chasing milo yield, make sure you have enough water or get your seeding rate done properly. It works great.
Okay. That brings up to mind, Stacey, do you do test plots on your own property, whether that's through a company that you work with or your own private test plots of whether that's varieties or different methods or even some of the newfangled stuff that salesmen are trying to sell you? Any testing?
Yes, and it goes back to the reniform situation. Probably 10 years ago is when we started some testing on one of my farms. My daughter did a reniform project for 3 or 4 years throughout late junior high and high school. She worked with Dr. Terry Wheeler at the experiment station with it, and they got pretty detailed. They even got over my head on several things, and I've enjoyed being able to incorporate her into this challenge, I guess you would call it, that we have. But yes, there have been a couple of different companies that run the tests. They've been very beneficial to watch what works, what doesn't. I've appreciated the attention that they have paid to our challenges that we're having. They've listened, and it's encouraging to see something come out of those efforts for 10 years.
Okay. Jeremy, do you you do some test plots on your own property of techniques and varieties and things, right?
Yes. Yeah. Similar to Stacey, I've worked every year. I have one farm that Extension, AgriLife Extension works with me on. That they do some research with Dr. Terry Wheeler, same person. And then I've been, honored the last 4 or 5 years. I've been a APT grower for FiberMax Cotton and on their variety trials. And then this year I was even a grower for some of their stuff that's way further down the line for BASF. And, I think it's important as a farmer to partner with these companies to, figure out what we can do that's going to be best for our region. And then I tell people I have my own trials. I have a lot of trials that I find out that didn't work. And then, that's also one of the things that sometimes can be frustrating as a farmer is you try something and it doesn't work. You got to wait a whole nother year to try it again. It's not like you can. So I think that my employees think I'm kind of crazy because I'm always throwing in some new seeds, some new cover crops, and trying different things and learning the hard way, I guess. Is sometimes I feel like I'm my own experiment station at times. But yeah, we're always trying to do what we can to learn and try new things.
Okay. Well, as we start winding this down, let's talk about general farm operations. Is there one cost or input that you just won't skimp on in the name of budget and efficiency? And what is one thing that pays you dividends year after year? And maybe that's labor, maybe that's equipment, maybe that's a crop input. What's just one thing that when you start looking at your budget, you're like, nope, that one stays. Got you, Jeremy?
Man, I was hoping Stacey would go first so I could learn something because that's I'm unique on this. So in my area, a lot of farms have gone bigger equipment. I'm not going to skimp on good quality employees. To me, I'd rather pay somebody a good, decent salary that's a good employee that I can trust than to pay, and no offense, but pay John Deere. I mean, that's my personal opinion. It's hard to find good people, and I've got 3 really good people that work for me. I call them team members. We're a team. And when I look at my budget and I think, well, I could go a bigger toolbar and a bigger tractor and cut out that person. That, to me, I'm not going that route. That's what a lot of farmers in my region have done. And I'm not saying they're wrong. That's just different philosophies. I've tried not to skimp on fertility. Now I'm trying to be as precise as we can, but as Stacey said, I've been writing down notes. So I'm always trying to learn, but talking about starting out with a decent fertility program, I think is important. Good quality seed is valuable. Those are probably the thing, but when I look at my employees is a big deal to me. When you got a good one, I think when you got good employees, you need to pay them well. And that's just a personal conviction of mine. And so I try not to cut there on my labor.
Okay. Stacey, same question. What's the one thing that year after year you just look at the budget and go, I'm not going to skimp on that?
Well, I'm not going to make for any new exciting breakthroughs on that question, because I'm right in line with Jeremy on that in terms of fertility. If you're going to spend that for seed, if you're going to spend that for irrigation cost, and you don't have proper fertility out there, you've just wasted money up front. So fertility, again, and that's not to say I throw the kitchen sink at it. That's just to have something reasonable in place. And I want to go back to the labor. You cannot do this without good labor and good help and people that you consider your colleagues, not just your employees. And as technology progresses, and I want to caution that in this area, because as you go to harvesting equipment that one person can do, as you go to cover crops that require less sand fighting, which is a great thing we have to do in West Texas without cover crops, it's a lot of fun. If you move away from those things, you think, well, I can cut back my labor, and you can. But in the heat of the battle in the summer, when irrigation drives so much of our economic well-being here, and you have multiple pivots, 10, 15, 20, they're all over the board with what different producers have. And you have some drip irrigation mixed in with that. And on any given day, weekends included, you may have 3 pivot flats, 2 gearboxes go out, center drive motors go out. You've got drip leaks that the gophers chewed up. That drives my decision on having to keep labor. It's not the fact that one guy can drive a cotton stripper now, and we don't have to have module builders and bow buggies. There are things that go on the farm all year long that, to be successful, you have to be timely in the repair of it. And if you skimp on labor, you may have some great equipment, but you're not going to get there at the end.
I'm just so glad to hear you both say that, because a lot of times I think we forget to tell the folks that help us thank you, and it's not out of being malicious or anything. It's just we take them for granted sometimes, and so I applaud you both for mentioning that labor is so critical to what we all do out here. We just couldn't make it work if we didn't have everybody's hands, right?
That's right.
Okay. Well, now, as we wrap this up, do you guys have questions, or is there one bit of advice that you have gotten from your years of experience and that really stuck with you all those years, and that you'd like to pass on? Stacey?
Well, that's a question I know I could have a better answer if I had thought about that longer. A lot of the advice, I go back to my grandfather. That's where I would go out and change irrigation or I played in the irrigation ditch. I'm not even going to act like I worked. I didn't. But it was just the perseverance. When you look at the struggles of the early 70s, which I was not involved in, but I've heard much about, and you look at the economic issues of the 80s, and you see the problems that we had in the 90s, it goes on and on. if you're dedicated to agriculture and farming and you have a passion for it, you can't give up. And that can be challenging when we're facing the economic things that we're looking at today. But that old joke about the farmer saying, well, there's always next year. Well, that comes not just from a saying, it comes from faith. And I believe that's probably the biggest lesson that I have learned. And I try to carry that forward. It's harder some days than others. And it's pretty tough right now when it hasn't rained and your crop was a total disappointment, but that's happened before. And we're going to have to figure out a way to get through it if at all possible.
Yep. Faith does a lot. My dad used to say, what makes a seed grow? It's faith. The seed knows how to go up because of faith. There's sunlight up there. So we just have to, have a little bit of faith. Mm-hmm. Jeremy, what's one piece of advice that you've gotten over the years that if you had a beginning farmer or somebody who's coming into cotton, that you could pull them aside and go, look, I'm gonna lay this down for you so you don't have to go through what I went through.
Well, I like Stacey's perseverance. I needed to hear that one today, Stacey, because after this year, I'm kind of like, man, a lot. Can I give you two, Jennifer? I got two. Sure. One was a farmer that farmed in Shallwater that recently passed away, and we went to church together. And I remember when I decided to come back to the farm and start farming again, I asked him for some advice, and he told me something that I think about a lot. He said, now, Jeremy, just remember that cotton or whatever you're growing, it doesn't care what color the paint is of the tractor you're driving. It doesn't care if it's new or old or whatever. Just focus on what you need to grow a crop. And, as a farmer, we can get caught up in the newest and the brightest and the, shiniest or whatever. And sometimes I have to go back to what he told me. And I tell people I don't have an equipment pile, I have a junk pile. I try to find something that's reliable that will do the job and not, from an economic standpoint. And then the other one is Gabe Brown, I'm a big follower of Gabe Brown. He's big in the regenerative agriculture. Gabe wrote a book called Dirt to Soil. I really highly recommend it. And I've actually I've been fortunate that Gabe and I have actually become, friends and acquaintances. And I had him out here on my farm a year ago. But he says something in his book that I think about a lot. And I wrote it down here. He says, don't try to outperform your environment. And sometimes I think as farmers, we chase this yield and, I want to be in the 1 ton club or I want to make this. And maybe our environment's not suitable for that production. I mean, it'd be like me saying, I want to make 250 bushel corn, when in reality where I farm, that's not, unless it's a fluke year, that's not probably ever going to happen. And so I try to go back to a lot of times of what environment do I farm in, and let's not try to outperform it. Now, if we get some timely rains and we get some things that work in our favor, then maybe we can hit that mark. But I think, like Stacey said, not throwing the kitchen sink at it, just trying to, like this farm is a 1.5 acre farm consistently. This farm's a 3 acre farm, and just trying to make sure that I not try to outperform my environment. And so those are two things I try to think about a lot. So
I always like how Gabe talks about working with the farm instead of, trying to make the farm do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Listen to the farm and it'll tell you what it needs, basically.
Yes. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for Gabe. So.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, I think that about wraps it up. It doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming in from the chat, but one last call. If you've got a question, now's your time. And it looks like, no, we don't have any more questions. So thank you both, Jeremy and Stacey, for joining us today on this virtual Cotton U. I know that a Zoom farmer panel is not exactly the easiest thing to manage, so I appreciate it. And, we do have, no, we're good. We have a thank you for both of your great input from Jesse Hills. So thank you, Jesse. And thank you, folks, for joining us today. This wraps up our last session of Cotton U. Thank you, Jeremy and Stacey. Thank you, John Robinson. Thank you to all of our great speakers for joining us. We want to thank the good folks at Idea Ag and the Amarillo Farm and Ranch Show for helping us put on this morning of education. We sure want to mark your calendars for November 30th, December 1st, and December 2nd, because that is when we are going to be back in person for the Amarillo Farm and Ranch Show, back in the Amarillo Civic Center. And it is going to be so good to see all of your shining faces in person again. We want to thank you for spending your time with us today. Now, remember, registered attendees will get a survey in their mail or in their email boxes. As you know, if you're a regular attendee of HPJ's U events, we take the feedback that you give us very seriously. And we're going to do that. There we go. Very seriously in creating next year's U event for you. So please let us know how we're doing and what we could be doing better. Registered attendees will also receive an 8-week subscription to High Plains Journal complimentary for joining us today. And if you missed out on part of this presentation or our first presentation of the morning, you can see the recordings at hpj.com/cottonu. We want to thank all of our sponsors again, DeltaPine, Precision Planting, Ward Labs, NRCS, and NexGen Americot, and Western Equipment. On behalf of all of us here at High Plains Journal and the good folks at Idea Ag, thanks for riding with us, and we will see you on the trail. Bye now.
Dirt road in a gooseneck, saddle up with me. Dry land in God's country, crops far as I can see. Headlights on both ends of my day. This country life is for me. Ride with us, HPJ. Ride with us, HPJ.